Today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite trees found in the forest or in the woodlands of North Carolina, especially in the Piedmont and the coastal plain. And that is the persimmon tree. It's a member of the ebony family, which tells me it's really hard wood, and historically it's been used to make shuttles in factories, textile factories. It's used in golf clubs and billiard sticks. But it's an excellent native tree found, of course, in North Carolina. It's named Diospyros, which is the Latin name for it, means food of the gods or food of Zeus. The persimmon contains a tannin in there called khaki tannin that you can taste if you eat one before it's fully ripe. They're bitter, but after they ripen, they're sweet and a very highly desirable food. The persimmon has a fleshy pulp to it with very hard seeds on the inside. You can see them right here. It's not infrequent that I don't pop one in my mouth every now and then and eat the pulp and spit the seeds out. The persimmon has a very rich history here in our culture. Native Americans used to make persimmon bread out of it. And that's the way I learned to love it. My mother made persimmon bread that stores well, kind of like zucchini bread, very tasty. You can put nuts in it if you like and other seasoning. But I think what I really love the most now is persimmon pudding. My wife and her grandmother made persimmon pudding. In fact, I think every rural church at one time, when they had their covered dishes, the women would bring in their persimmon puddings, and they all had a little different flavor to them, and I used to love to sample them, just like I did everybody's deviled eggs and potato salad. They all tasted a little different. It's a delicious dessert too for us. It's a little trouble to make, but it's certainly worth the effort. Like I said earlier, they begin to ripen up in the fall of the year, and usually by now, here in early December, they're fully ripened and falling on the ground. Most importantly though, it's an excellent food for wildlife. There's over 20 species of animals that feast on this fruit. Foxes, opossums, deer of course love them, songbirds like them. It's a very valuable food source, very high in calories, very rich nutritional fruit. And of course that is where us as tree farmers, we need to be concerned is, this is food for wildlife. And even though we enjoy a dessert every now and then, we have to realize this comes at a critical time for wildlife in the fall of the year as other food sources begin to dissipate. Now let's have a little fun with the persimmon. About 50 years ago, on a cold, rainy, wet day in Montgomery County, I went by to visit the county rangers, county forest rangers, and they were all inside that day because of the weather, and several of them were over in the corner pulling out persimmon seeds out of these persimmons. And I said, what are you fellows doing? They said, well, we're splitting the persimmon seed to see what the winter weather is going to be like this year. Well, I sat down with some curiosity and I said, I want to watch this and learn something. So what they did, they would take this hard seed, clean it off the pulp, because when it comes out of the persimmon, it's going to be fleshy, it's going to be a little wet and sticky, and you got to get all this off or you're going to hurt yourself. So you wipe all the flesh off this and get that seed good and dry as best you can. You want a good fat one, not one that's dried up, about like that. And so you take that seed, like this, and take you a thin knife. I'm going to use one of my melon knives. And there's a seam that splits the seed in half. Runs right down here. And you're going to put that real thin bladed knife on that seam and very carefully try to split the seed in half. Now, you just start to tap the knife to get it to go down. Be very careful, because if you slip, you will slice your finger. So you slit the seed in half, and inside the seed, you will see the cotyledon leaves of the new leaves that will emerge in the spring. And the design of that leaf cotyledon tells you what winter weather is going to be. If it's in the shape of a spoon, which this one is, you can see the spoon shape, that tells you you're going to be shoveling snow. If it's a knife, and I have seen some that look like a knife. That tells you it's going to be a very windy, frigid winter. If it's in the shape of a fork, it's going to be a mild winter. It's a fun little project for children and grandchildren. I find it to be 50% accurate, which is pretty much rivals the Weather Service. But it's a fun little project to do and makes the persimmon that much more interesting, I think, for landowners and their family members. But we've done this for 50 years, split the seeds. I used to write about it in my column in the paper, and people always would email me or text me and say, what's the winter projection like this year? Okay, well, now we're going to move on and finish this with what I really enjoy and look forward to is my wife's persimmon pudding. So here we have it. Now I like to put a little Cool Whip or a little whipped cream on mine, but this is the highlight of the Christmas season or Thanksgiving, especially in the fall of the year. My grandchildren wait every year for this, as do some of our neighbors. We're fortunate to have some female persimmon trees on our property. Keep in mind that it takes two to tango with persimmons. So you're going to have a male tree and you're going to have a female tree. How do you tell the difference? The only way is the female will have the fruit, the male will have no fruit on it. So once you identify persimmon leaves or the bark on persimmon, leave them alone because one's going to be male, one's going to be female. It can take anywhere from 12 to 15 years for them to start bearing fruit. But it's a welcome addition to our forest, especially for our wildlife species that depend on it. Remember, over 20 species of animals depend on this persimmon, some of them as much as 50% of their diet in the fall. And of course, for me, I look forward to it in the fall of the year and at Christmas. I'm Rhett Davis with the North Carolina Tree Farm Program.